Alright, so here we're going to look at the characteristics of the homologous series. Alright, so like I mentioned before, homologous series is a family of organic compounds which follow a regular structural pattern in which each successive member differ in its molecular formula by a CH2 group. Alright, so what are the characteristics of the homologous series? Number one of the characteristics of the homologous series is that all members share the same molecular formula. Alright, all the members share the same molecular formula. So if we look at the alkanes, for instance, all the members of the alkane series, they have the same general molecular formula, which is CnH2n plus 2. All the members in the alkene series, or the alkene series rather, they share the same molecular formula, which is CnH2n. All the members in the alkyne series share the same molecular formula, which is CnH2n minus 2. Alright, and so on with the rest. So all members of a homologous series share the same molecular formula. Then number two characteristic is that each successive member differ in its molecular formula by a CH2 group. Each successive member differ in a series, in a particular series, differ in molecular formula by a CH2 group. So the difference between methane, CH4, and ethane, which is C2H6, the difference between these two is a CH2 group, right? This is methane, alright, methane, then this is ethane. So the difference between these two successive members in the alkane series is a CH2 group. So each successive member differ in molecular formula by what? A CH2 group. Then each successive member in a series differ in relative molecular mass by 14. Right? So the difference between the relative molecular mass of ethane and methane is what? 14. Right? So the molecular mass, the relative molecular mass of methane is 16 grams. Right? It will give you 16 grams. Then if you look at ethane, when you calculate the relative molecular mass of ethane, you are going to have what? You are going to have 30. So 30 minus 16 will give us what? 14. Right? So each successive member in a series differ in relative molecular mass by what? 14. Very important. Then the chemical properties of the members are similar with gradual variation along the series. So the chemical properties of the members are similar with gradual variation in the series. So if we look at this alkane series, for instance, the chemical properties of these members are similar, only a slight variation as we move down. Alright. Then the physical properties changes gradually as the number of carbon increases. Right? So if you look at this alkane series, for instance, as the number of carbon increases, right, the physical properties begin to change. So physical properties like boiling point and melting point, as the number of carbon increases, it begins to what? Increase. For example, methane, from the first member to the fourth member, they are gases. So from here to here, they are what? They are gases. Alright? They are gases. From pentane, which is the fifth member, down to tetradecane, or down to pentadecane rather, down to pentadecane, they are liquid, right? And you should know that as the number of carbon increases, right, the liquid begins to thicken up. All right, from the 16th member down are solid. All right, so again, the physical properties changing gradually as the number of what carbon increases. So as the number of carbon increases down the series, the physical properties begin to what change. For example, they begin to move towards what? Solid. right? And also the boiling point and the melting point begins to what? To increase. So the last characteristic of the homologous series that we're going to look at is that all members are prepared by the same general method. All right? All members are prepared by the same general method, right? So again, the third characteristic that I talked about is that each successive member in a series differ in relative molecular mass by what? 14 grams. All right? So the first member that we have here is what? Is methane. So the relative molecular mass of methane is what? Is 16. The relative molecular mass of ethane is what? Is 30. So the difference between the relative molecular mass of these two successive members, 30 minus 16, that will give you what? 14. Alright, so each successive member differ in relative molecular mass by what? 14 grams. So basically we've looked at 5 characteristics of the homologous series. Number 1 is that all members share the same molecular formula. Number 2 is that each successive member in a series differ in molecular formula by a CH2 group. Alright. Number 3 is that each successive member in a series differ in relative molecular mass by 14. Then the chemical properties of the members are similar with gradual variation along the series. Then number 5 is that the physical properties change gradually as the number of carbon increases. Then all members are prepared by the same general method. Alright. So next we're going to look at functional group.